Welcome back, Steeler fans, to another week where the Steelers live to fight for their chance to the dance. That's right. Believe it or not, we still have playoff hopes. Can't really believe that when I say that out loud, but sure enough, according to an article I read in the Athletic today, there is an 8% chance. What's that famous line, Corey, from that one movie, Dumb and Dumber?
I've never seen that.
Oh, Corey.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that young. Classic movie.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yep.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I am your host, Jeremy Coleman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the Message Boards, joined by Corey Karbowski. You know him as Corey39. Corey, did you have a good Christmas?
Oh, I had a great one. Nice Steelers win over the Raiders. I really do feel like one of the first things we have to address is Franco Harris's passing, though.
Absolutely. That's where we were going with this. I hate to say it, Steeler fans, but what a shit way for that game to be what was something supposed to be a joyous occasion turned into such a somber event. Just with him passing the most unlikeliest of times, to him not being there, to have his jersey there retired, just definitely kind of put a damper on the whole game. And you kind of have to wonder if that seeped into the players' minds a little bit with just kind of the slow start and everything. But Corey, why don't you tell us a little bit, kind of your thoughts about this tragic event?
I mean, I never got to witness Franco play, but
Yeah,
I mean, I've got a signed picture. My dad has a jersey that hung up in his man cave. I'd always go in there. Like I'd play Madden. I'd always love to use Franco, big back, and run people over. I mean, it was evident just reading things about him, and I've obviously known about Franco for forever, is that he loved the spotlight. So for him to pass on what was supposed to be like his shining day it's just a damn shame. Or like just before his day.
Yeah, just a true shame, honestly. There's no other word for it. I mean, to a guy that sparked something that may have never have came, if he doesn't take a controversial deflected pass and take it to the house for the Steelers' first playoff win ever, I believe, to starting this crazy journey as a Steeler fan, to 4 Super Bowls later, to from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin from Bradshaw to Roethlisberger to all the great players that have come through this franchise and all of the success that this franchise has had since that moment. It could have been a very different story if that play is ruled any other way, because you talk to any of those players that were on that team, that play gave them the confidence that they knew they were turning the corner. Of course, they didn't go on to win a Super Bowl that year, but the next year they took that momentum and won their first Super Bowl. So just it's hard to imagine a legend like Franco is no longer around. So our thoughts and prayers are with his family and his son. So on a brighter note, the Steelers did find a way to win a game, which honestly to me, I told several of my friends, might have been one of the darkest days in the Steelers history franchise if they could not find a way to win this game with everything that it meant before Franco's passing to after his passing. Just that this was a moment that this team could not lose. And thank God they found a way to win. Really got to thank the Raiders defense again for not being ready when they needed to be ready the most. But they did find a way to win, Corey. What are your thoughts about this past game?
I mean, the first thing I feel like we have to talk about is Kenny Pickett's final drive. And the one thing that I really want to kind of discuss, just seeing some discourse online about it, is, people are like, oh, Matt Canada, what a great play call. And I'll admit it was a great play call at the end. However, there's reports, it's hard to know truth from false online, but there are reports that Kenny was the one calling the plays on the final drive. So for they're not the final drive, of course, but the touchdown scoring
Yeah.
drive. So for Matt Canada to be getting, any praise really for a game where we scored 13 points and he didn't call the plays supposedly for the final drive. It was Kenny Pickett. Like, are we really going to give him crown him with laurels and give him a big trophy for leading us to 6 points? I mean, I get the weather conditions were bad, but I'm just not sure Matt Canada's name, other than cool play call at the end, it should be given any kind of light for the performance that he gave on Sunday or on Saturday.
Well, and to piggyback off that, it's nice to finally not feel like Steeler fans are kind of left out in the cold here, because sure enough, during the post-game post-game coverage on Acrisure Field, Steve Smith even called out Matt Canada, calling his offense very Saturday-ish. Now, for those of you who hear that, that's not a criticism of Jeff Saturday, the coach, who's in Indianapolis. That is a flat-out criticism that his offense belongs on Saturdays in college football. And sure enough, where was Matt Canada, an offensive coordinator before ever trying in the NFL? Oh, that's right, the college ranks. So for Steve Smith to kind of go out of his way and throw that out there, that it finally feels like there's a legit media person out there that's willing to validate most Steelers fans, issues with this guy. And I got to give him credit. Normally I don't watch a lot of Steve Smith or whatever, but I'll take it in this case, because he basically just called out Matt Canada off the national broadcast that his offense belongs on Saturdays during the college football season, and that he waited till the very end of the game to make his best play call on an end around to Connor Hayward. So, and with that being said, we also have someone else joining us here. Will Massac, as Bradshaw to Ben, is joining us here.
Matt Canada slander is like the bat signal for Will.
Yeah, right.
That signal you mentioned Matt Canada. I'll be right in. It's like, it's like the bat sign, the Batman shines in the sky. Yeah. What's going on, gents?
Oh, not much. We're just going.
I'm sitting out in New York City on the street. So yeah.
So we did talk a little bit about Franco, but I'm glad you got in early, because you're the only one who actually got to watch him play out of the two of us, or out of the three of us. So
true enough. I mean, and I had a personal encounter with Franco. It was a very funny deal. In those days I owned a sign company, and so I got a lot of calls to somebody wants you to come out and look at their sign, or a place where they want to put a sign, or whatever the deal was. And but I just got this message in the days before voicemails or emails or whatever. That was a message that was call Franco with a phone number. And so you're like, Franco, that's interesting. And I was like, it isn't. And they were like, no, I don't think so. It's just some guy named Franco. Okay, great. So I called the number and I talked to the guy for 2 minutes, and I'm thinking to myself the whole time, this is Franco Harris, isn't it? But I didn't want to ask him. I didn't say. So I didn't know until I actually got there to look at his thing. And he was like, he's just a guy trying to open a storefront and needed a sign. And it was nothing was really that exciting about it, but he was so normal. So for him, it was like a totally normal interaction. And he was not at all big timing anything, just asking normal questions and talking to people on the street and whatever. But for me, at the whole time, I'm like, oh my God, this is Franco Harris. I met a lot of celebrity people and in my day, and that was one of the very few times where I was totally I could barely speak, because he had a larger than life presence, even though he was very normal and treated people like you would hope that your heroes treat people, in a very, very nice and genuine way. But he was actually physically larger than life. He was one of the sturdiest, biggest people I'd ever been with. You see him on television, you think he's a little bit big, but you don't think he's big hands, and he's just a big guy in every way, inside and out, and as a generous person. So yeah, it was very sad. As a person, I just want to say that first. As a player, he had an uncanny like a competitive knack to him. And I think, you know, in later years, I realized how much he meant to that team in terms of how he inspired them with his play and how he was really, you know, like a big part of the team in the huddle and in practice and in games. But he had just an ability. He was slippery. He was slippery in a way that he would make something out of nothing in a way that only Le'Veon Bell maybe touched on, you know, then at the peak Lev Bell running part of his career where he would hesitate and look for a spot and see the spot and go. Franco had that gift, except for he also just was big. Guys would just like go to tackle him and kind of fall off him in a way like that sort of Terrell Davis way. You guys might be old enough to remember, or you Jeremy might be old enough to remember, or
Cincinnati.
Yeah, and, you know, in present day terms, I'm trying to think who that guy would be. Derek, what's his name from the Titans, right?
Derrick Henry.
Franco was, basically Derrick Henry. Yes, that's what you said. No, it was basically that very similar to that guy, but it was even more amazing because he wasn't a big college star when he came in the league. Like that's one of the, you talk about the '74 class with all those Hall of Famers. Franco in '72, man, that was an amazing draft pick because he was not anybody's pick for, like, you know, who the best running back was, and his teammate was. His teammate was the guy that everybody wanted, Lydell Mitchell. So when Franco came in the league, it was a bit of a shock, and it was, you know, it took about half a season of Franco in Pittsburgh before suddenly all that stuff you see now, the fanatic fans and the, you know, the signs at the stadium and people going crazy for this and that and the other. None of that existed even midway into '72. Like it wasn't into halfway through Franco's season when he became the regular starter and they started winning. That's when all of this started. So as Joe Green famously said, none of this happened before Franco, and we didn't really do that much after Franco either. Like Franco was pretty much responsible for us being here on the show, you know, and all of those all the stuff that we've had. He and Joe Green, I think, really had a ton to do with that. And they were similar kind of leaders, really fantastic. And it's so sad what happened that he was lost before the game. Even like that is just, you know, that's like a Shakespearean sad. So we all got to enjoy him in his life, and we all got to be sad for him and enjoy Saturday night for him.
Yeah, I made the point where you don't know what happens if, you know, he doesn't manage to snag that pass. You know, none of this might have ever happened. That play gave that team confidence, you know, to one of the most successful professional franchises in all professional sports.
And it was a hustle play. It was a don't give up play, not really a, you know, I'm so talented kind of a play, right? So in a way,
he's simply just running to the ball, like he's, you know, 20 yards behind the play and just takes off towards where the ball is going.
No, and I like the thing he said too. Fate is like this a little bit. You know, he said, if I had run faster, it never would have happened. If I had run slower, it never would have happened. It was like it had to be exactly the right speed. And the other really cool thing is that he used to say that, I've heard him say this many times, that he doesn't remember anything he remembers going toward, you know, it's like, I'm going to go towards the ball and the ball's in the air. And he saw the collision, and that's the last thing he remembers until he was stiff arming the guy. Like all the stuff in the middle was like fight or flight, you know, human instinct. Like he just got the ball, and he said that he doesn't even know the rest of his career if he ever grabbed a low ball like that without going down, like diving for it. It was the only time in his whole life he ever caught a ball and kept running that was that low. So the whole thing is very real, like almost fated to happen, and in a way, it is a little bit perfect, even though it's horrible. Perfect. That, you know, bittersweet perfect that he lasted, you know, right until this week where everybody wanted to talk to him and everybody wanted to remember. So yeah, pretty cool. Amazing, you know, amazing. If you're a Steelers fan, especially of that era, you know, it doesn't get any better than Franco. There's guys who are his equal in importance in to the franchise, but there's nobody bigger.
Yeah, definitely not. Just such a tragic thing to happen, you know, but before this game that was supposed to honor him and retire his jersey. We were kind of diving into the game when you joined. Yeah. You know, it sure felt like almost like the players kind of felt the weight from his passing early on in the game, because we did not seem very ready to go out there. When we dived a little bit into Matt Canada here, you know, your bat signal, so to say. there any Matt Canada slander you want to throw out there, or comments about our much
Oh,
maligned offensive coordinator?
I don't know. It's like I hate to put it all on Matt Canada because although I don't think he's a good offensive coordinator, I also think that there were restrictions placed on him before he got into office that affect greatly what he's asked, what he's tries to do. You know, they are not interested in challenging vertically at any point in the game, let alone on early downs, or when the game is close. You know, so they're more interested in keeping the game close than almost any offensive coordinator in any college or pro team that you'll ever see. So it's really hard to like be super down on him. But yeah, like this is a game where the Raiders it seems like the Steelers are on a run of playing teams who are just eager to shoot themselves in the foot or make mistakes or give the ball away or play stupid football in an effort to give the game away. And the Steelers, to their credit, have been a little bit smarter and made a little bit fewer mistakes and got a little luckier with bounces and didn't, got some officiating calls to go their way. And you put that all together and, they are where they are. Right. I don't know if that's sustainable. And I don't know if that means that they would be, any kind of a threat to anybody in the playoffs if their 2% chance came through. But Matt Canada's not going to make or break it one way or the other, because I think he's doing the bidding of the guy who's in charge.
Yeah, Corey, I want to throw something out to you real quick. And I kind of noticed this early in the game with just kind of the way the game script was going. Boy, it sure seemed like we wanted to come out and pass the ball in the worst possible weather possible against the worst run defense in the league. Can you explain to me why it seemed like we were more interested in passing the ball when all year long and over the stretch of the last 5 or 6 games have really started to run the ball? Well, why did we go away with what's been working, especially against a team that's not any good against stopping the run?
My only assumption can be that we want to go out there and we can't pass the ball. Like, it's cold weather. We're going to do what we want. Like, that's maybe like that mentality is what caused. I mean, there's people literally made fun of how Ben threw the ball 40 odd times in the last horrible weather game. And then we come out and throw our rookie quarterback into a situation where he's throwing the ball 39 times a game. And what I don't understand is none of it was forced. Like, the final drive maybe, but the first half wasn't forced to pass the ball. Like, we could have elected to run the ball at any time. Now, that doesn't mean when we were in the ball we were effective. That's one thing I will mention, is that we averaged 3.3 yards a carry, 3.9 if you include the jet sweep. But that's not a garbage time play, but it's a garbage time play. Like, when we wanted to run the ball and set the tone and get yardage on early downs, we averaged 3.3 yards a carry. So we still weren't successful at that. But I think there's just so many problems with the offense. I mean, even if we miraculously make the playoffs, which would be a legitimate miracle, it's a 2% chance. And I mean, what are we hoping for? Like, are we hoping to play the Bengals again? I mean,
it would be the Chiefs or the Bills. That's who we're in.
Okay.
Sorry, Corey. I wanted to jump in because I don't have too much longer. Just a quick thing I wanted to mention about cold weather. I'm really glad, actually, whether it was the right strategic move or not, that they threw the ball a lot in the cold. And I'll tell you why. Having played football in the cold for, parts of 50 years, I can tell you, especially the last, 15, 20 years of, playing ball where I had to go out there and catch the football in the cold, that the approach to how you have to throw to guys, it's the equivalent of like you have to throw them open. You throw the ball in a direction to like get them going a different way so that they go to open space and so on. It's parallel to that, but instead of doing that, you are putting the ball on their frame instead of asking them to go and get balls in the wrong direction where they have to extend their hands, because it's very hard to do that in cold. When it's cold like that, if you get the ball on your frame, it's not that hard to catch. But if you get the ball away from your body and you've got to your momentum is going the wrong direction, like that kind of stuff that's easy to do when the weather is good is very hard to do when it's really cold. So I'm glad we got to see this quarterback with his, questions about his ability to handle a ball. Now, granted, it's dry, cold. That's a little different than when it's like that wasn't at Buffalo that one year where it was so slippery that nobody could hold the football. And it wasn't, 40 mile an hour wind sideways, et cetera. But the fact that they made some adjustments, you can tell both quarterbacks in that game started putting the ball on the receivers instead of, leading them away or giving them high balls that were hard for them to catch. So I think it's a good learning experience, and it's good to see your rookie quarterback get a chance to be in the league and be challenged to, have to throw the ball differently in cold weather and understand that there's a difference in how you want to approach it. And the same with the receivers, with that they also had to make adjustments to how they were catching the ball, and the only way to learn that sometimes is to get out there and do it in that weather and against that, kind of a competition.
Gotcha. Well, Will, while you say that, is there anything else from this game that you liked? I mean, I thought it was nice that our run defense showed up against, what was supposedly a pretty good running attack. I think they held Josh Jacobs to, I think it was 34 yards on like 18 or 19 carries, something like that. That's impressive. Anything else from this game you want to mention here?
Well, they broke Josh Jacobs' will. Like, he doesn't want to come back to the Raiders next year.
I saw that rant. I saw that.
Like, man, done. And this was like the last straw for him. So yeah, that was great. No, I was just going to say that Cam Hayward, I think I said the same thing last week, that since we called him out on the show for having a subpar season, like, is he done? He played like 2 or 3 of the best football games of his whole career, including this week.
I knew he listened to this show.
He heard the noise.
Man, this was like almost like a James Harrison against the Ravens Monday night kind of a game for Cam Hayward. He did everything. So that was really impressive. But I also know that he was very close to Franco personally. And I felt like he was one person that understood who that guy was. So we always talk about, it's like they're going to go out there and win one for the Gipper. But I think those guys don't really have any personal connection to him. Like, Corey is younger than many of the guys on the team. You probably understand who Franco Harris is and the meaning of who he was for the Steelers 10 times as well as the guys that play there that have no idea who that guy is, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that was a huge part of what made the game special. And, I'm like, I as someone wrote on the board this week, it's like the idea of the Steelers getting a top 10 pick, like, that's sailed. Like, that's not happening. Doesn't matter what they do. So at this point, I don't think their draft position is going to be so much better or worse. It doesn't really matter to me. But I mentioned the thing about Kenny Pickett and the receivers, having to work in the cold. Like, to me, that's the kind of thing that I'm glad to be seeing about this season. And I'm glad to see that the winning touchdown play was a play where they threw, down the field and over the middle, and they worked it against the coverage that it was the right call against. So somebody was like paying attention and learning something from that they wouldn't have been able to get if we didn't have that experience. And to be able to win the game with it, then they won't ever forget what they did to get there. Now, granted, it was a horrible defensive play. That was my other takeaway is, I didn't get too excited about the game-winning drive because I don't know what the Raiders were planning on defense. But if I were the defensive coordinator, I think I could have called better defenses than they had in that last run there. And the execution, particularly when they went to quarters in red zone, was about the worst. That was the only thing I've ever seen as bad as the Steelers' red zone pass defense against New England in any big game, where they gave up that exact play numerous times, where the safety got beat on the inside move post. So anyway, I'm glad to see those things. And the rest of it, I don't know what you can take away. I feel like these games there's things happening, things being learned, and the young leaders, all played well. All that stuff is great. What we're really getting out of it for the future, though, I fear, my takeaway is that I fear that Mike Tomlin has to feel emboldened about his concept of style of play, because it's perfect for this sort of game where you keep it close and you win it at the end, and the defense, gives you a chance to win, and your offense comes through against baby soft defense at the end. Like, that's the plan, and it certainly worked the last couple of weeks, and that makes me feel like, now that guy is that much more entrenched that it works, and that he's going to keep doing it. And I'm not sure what that looks like against a good team. So I guess we're going to find out as the years go on.
Yeah. Yes, we will. Corey, do you have anything more on this game before we move on to our matchups?
Nope. I think Will covered what I was going to say about Cam Hayward, and I've already gotten my rant about Matt Canada out of the way. Weekly rant about Matt Canada.
Sorry, dude. Hey, listen, just maybe give me one matchup thing, and then one just a little wrap up about the game, and I think that's about the time I have. I'm sorry, everybody.
Yeah, no, go for it, Will.
But well, you can do the matchup thing. I mean, just a quick matchup thing. I guess I would say, going back to the Ravens now. I don't know if we're going to see Lamar Jackson or not. Like, I'm not really sure how much incentive Baltimore has to play him. Maybe you guys know better than I what their chances of winning the division are. Like, what has to happen for them to win the division?
So Baltimore has to do is win their last 2 games. Now, if they were to win this week and Cincinnati were to fall at home against Buffalo, they get a chance to play for the division. But if both of them find a way to win, I think Baltimore needs some tiebreaker scenarios coming through to actually win the division.
Yeah, it just sort of makes me feel like there isn't a huge advantage to Baltimore to play Lamar if he's not 100%. Like, I think they'd rather have Lamar healthy for the playoffs than, because their chances of missing the playoffs now are next to nothing or nothing. So
they've clinched. They clinched with a win this week, and the Jets losing this past week. So I mean, that they are in, Cincinnati is in. Right now it's all about what kind of positioning you might want to put yourself in.
Sure.
Baltimore does have something to play for if they want a home playoff game, because theoretically that's still attainable. So I think you might see as we go in farther into this game, if they feel like they've got a chance to win it, I think you might see them turn more aggressively, knowing that they have a chance to win the division with a Cincinnati the week afterwards. But if things aren't going their way, they might try to, God forbid the Steelers get way ahead.
As far as the matchups are concerned, I mean, yes, everybody wants to talk about the Ravens running game against the Steelers because they've been pretty effective running it. But I think this game might swing the other way a little bit, especially with Tyler Huntley, that they might get the Steelers planning all week that we have to stop the run. We got to be tight against this run and not let them run the ball over us. And they might use that attention, with Steelers worrying about the run game to attack them a little bit more. Maybe not, super duper downfield, but like more of that tight end passing game that they love. So I could see the Ravens trying to sort of put it on the Steelers early in this game and think to themselves, if we get them down by enough, that we can grind it out against them the rest of the way. Because, on paper, that's a superior team, and it's like if they get a lead, I think they're going to feel pretty good about it. But it's also Ravens Steelers, and these two teams tend to bring out the worst in each other when it comes to putting games away. So anyway, that's all I was going to say. I just felt like this might be a little bit more of a Tyler Huntley against the Steelers secondary matchup. And Huntley's probably more inclined to throw the ball in the middle of the field not the middle of the field, to the edges than Lamar is, because Lamar doesn't throw to the sideline too much. So be interesting to see how this holds up. Steelers secondary looked pretty good the last few weeks, but they've also been playing quarterbacks in this whole stretch that are not necessarily world beaters.
Yeah, that's
what about you?
Very true. Well, a matchup I think we always have to worry about with the Ravens is their tight ends on our backers and safeties. I mean, we previously talked about, Patrick Ricard being a 300-pound animal, in the run game. But I mean, Mark Andrews actually, put up a decent stat week this past week. He looked a little more in sync with Tyler Huntley being a few games in. He kind of went through a cold stretch while Tyler Huntley was kind of feeling it out his first few games back, but Will Likely, just another super athletic guy who's honestly more receiver than tight end. But those guys, just they're matchup nightmares for what the Steelers defense has, especially since, Miles Jack is still dealing with a groin injury. That's something to look at. It means Mark Robinson's going to be getting elevated, be getting some snaps. Yeah, not that I'm disagreeing with you, Corey, but that means more Robert Spillane coverage, which is not always a great recipe for success.
Well, that's okay. It's not like the Ravens have a running back that runs like 4.3. It really isn't a problem.
Yeah,
like that's the thing. You get that circle route with the running back and Robert Spillane. That's bad. Bad news.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So got to watch out for just the play action passing game, because that seems where it seems like our guys are always a step slow against the Mark Andrews and the Will Likeleys of the world. So got to be watching out for them. Corey, what do you think is a good matchup for?
I want to piggyback kind of off what you said, and I'm not going to say that the tight ends aren't a good matchup, but they haven't been good for them lately. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely have not been impact players for the past 7 weeks. Now, does that change if Lamar Jackson's in? Probably. I mean, I bet you at least Mark Andrews gets more targets. But even before Lamar got injured, Andrews really hasn't been a factor since like week 8. I mean, you still have to give him attention. Like, you don't want to be the team that lets him go off on you and explode. But I mean, I think 75% of his productions from the first 7 weeks, if memory serves me right. So I'm not saying that's not a good match, like a critical matchup, because it will be, because those are guys that you let them run free on like butt ass single coverage against like Robert Spillane. And, you know, I like Mark Robinson. He's not a post-it note and sticky in coverage. Like, he's not going to tag along with Isaiah Likely. Then that could easily burn us. I think, I mean,
better chance running him over at the line of scrimmage before he gets in his route.
Yeah. I think the biggest one is going to be the turnover battle. I mean, we win that game if Trubisky doesn't throw 3 interceptions.
Nah, I don't know, because if they don't push it down the field, they may not score the points either. But yeah, I hear your point.
3 red zone interceptions or two red zone interceptions is pretty damning. Like, that's, even if you miss one of the field goals, it's a tied game at least or a tied game or win. It's a win because we lost.
I mean, I just feel like the Ravens, if they needed to score more points in that game, could have. At the end there, they were just like, rolling the Steelers. Like, why would they bother or more?
The high octane offense featuring Anthony Brown.
That's it. Sorry, I apologize to you and the audience, but I'm gonna have to give you my take and head back inside. As far as this game is concerned, I love what they, it was meaningful to me personally because I'm a fan of Franco's, that they didn't spoil that night by in the anniversary of the greatest play ever to lose a game that they easily could have lost, because for the first 55 minutes they sure looked like they were gonna. But I'm afraid that doesn't necessarily carry over to a playoff crunch time game against a team that may not desperately need the win as far as Baltimore is concerned, but who really needs they need to get rolling a little bit. So they need to start the momentum train, and having Pittsburgh come in as their designated opponent probably helps them a little with that. And I just feel like they're a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit better than the Steelers in that kind of a game. I'm not sure that the Steelers are necessarily up to hanging with that team. And to make matters worse, there's a good chance the Steelers will be eliminated before the kickoff. So they're playing for pride at that point against a division opponent that really wants to whip them. So I still may be a close enough game, but I'm going to call this 23-16 Ravens over the Steelers this week. I'd love to pick the Steelers again. I'll tell you, I will promise this: if the Steelers get all of those ridiculous tiebreaker scenario things to go for them before the kickoff, and they beat Baltimore next week, I will in fact be rooting for them to get the rest of the way, because it's just so ridiculous. Nobody loves chaos and ridiculousness and a Steelers playoff team more than me. So on that note, gents, go get them Steelers and enjoy the rest of the podcast. I'm sorry I can't join you more, but we'll have a good result. Maybe this weekend we'll have something to talk about one way or the other.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Will, for the time that you could. We appreciate you as always, sir.
You guys are the best. Okay. See you.
Yep. Corey, since he brought up, this playoff scenario thing, I think it's important that we kind of just put it out there for our fans and our audience to know exactly what needs to happen. So obviously we need to take care of business these next 2 weeks. We need to win against Baltimore. We need to win next week, home in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh versus Cleveland. But we do need some help, as always. It seems with some Mike Tomlin teams down the stretch to get in the playoffs. It's never on our own volition. We also need the Jets. Let's start off with the team that we need to hate the most, and that would be your Miami Dolphins. Screw those guys. They need to drop their last 2. If they don't drop their last 2, we're done, because they will end up with a better record than us de facto and own the tiebreaker head-to-head, since we did not take care of business earlier in the year. In addition, the Jets to lose to Seattle this week. Now, that game is in Seattle. The Jets, have been under Zach Wilson recently. They are going back to Mike White, so that'll be interesting. We'll dive a little more into that later in the show. And then we also need the Patriots to lose Week 18 at Buffalo, which could be very interesting within itself, because if Buffalo is tied up, the number 1 overall seed, there might not be much left for them to play for, other than just being, it's a divisional rival and they freaking hate the New England Patriots and everything that we stand for. So just very unique scenario that we need the AFC East to do their worst in the worst way possible.
What I'm nervous about is that Jets game. That's the one circled on my calendar.
Yep. Nope. I agree that it's a tough matchup heading into Seattle, but a Mike White led Jets team is a very different thing than a Zach Wilson led Jets team. As we've seen the past week and a half. Boy, that kid, he's got a lot of growing up to do and figuring out to do if he ever wants to do anything in this league. But getting back to our upcoming matchup here against the Ravens, I feel like we covered a decent amount. Are there any other matchups that we didn't get to while Will was with us here?
I mean, he mentioned it, but stopping Dobbins and Gus, even if it is going to take a full week of game planning, I think that's going to be critical. I texted our group chat during the game last week, and I was stunned. I mean, they didn't run hurry up, so subs were allowed. I was stunned on 3rd and 2 when we had 2 defensive linemen. And, I even did a little bit of research on this, and I was looking at our linebacker weights and our edge rushers. We had on 3rd and 2 on our 40, we had 2 players over 250 pounds in an NFL game when they were in, I think, 13 personnel.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
So damn stubborn with what our defense is going to be.
I'm sure you don't remember the exact play, Jeremy, but what do you think happened?
Well, my guess is they ran over the right side and got a first down.
I couldn't tell you the right or left side, but I know they got the first down.
Yeah.
Running the ball.
Yeah, so usually it's not to Cam Hayward's side. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So it's the other guy most of the time that gets pushed back. So, I mean, yeah, stopping the run's paramount. In the last game against Baltimore, we couldn't. J.K. Dobbins, in his first game back, to look pretty good. He's looked pretty good since. Maybe not touchdowns, but he's been racking up yardage. He put up, a ton against Cleveland when they played here recently. He's almost back to form, and that's dangerous because he's the one running back that scares me more than most, because his burst to get out in the open field is something that our front seven just doesn't have if we're not attacking the line of scrimmage. So definitely something to watch. We have to have guys get up on blockers. We have to get guys off blockers if we want a chance to win this game. Shoot, if Will was on here, he might say, run the bear defense and say, screw it, we'll take our chances elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I can't blame him, if that were to be his thought. But yeah, so done matchups wise, and I want to bring something up that I actually forgot to bring up regarding the Raiders game and just the conditions we were in. Mike Tomlin, in my opinion, made some bad calls in this game. Letting Chris Boswell try a 52-yarder in that weather, just several long field goals attempts. As a specialist yourself, what are your thoughts on the 4 field goals attempted? I know Chris Boswell hit 2, but I mean, with the conditions being how they were, what did you think of that kind of decision-making process?
So there's 2 aspects to this, and one I'm going to kind of place a little bit of blame on Boswell, because there is a little bit of blame on him. So the way that this will work is that the kickers will warm up in pregame, and they feel their range out. They see how far they can kick. I mean, I saw that kick in game. He hit it relatively clean, but he probably shouldn't have told Mike Tomlin that he could hit a 52-yarder in that, because what's going to happen is Mike Tomlin looks at him. Can you hit this? He tells him, yeah, he runs out on the field. Now, there's a bit of blame on Boswell. Most of it's on Tomlin. That's one of those things where you're like, feels like a -7. Do I really want to send my kicker out there right now? Like scientifically, when it's freezing cold outside, the balls will not compress as much if you hit them. It's just, the science of how the ball works. It will not compress as much in the way kicker and the punters hit it. Ball compresses off their foot and it kind of springs off. When it's cold, you don't get that. It it kind of, from my understanding, and I know a few NFL specialists and I know plenty of college specialists, is that even if you have a big leg, anything over like 42, maybe 45, you have a little bit of wind, should not be attempted if it's below like 20 degrees, let alone like the feels like of -7 or -4, whatever it was. So there were just a lot of miscues that kind of went into that. But my understanding is that there's no way in hell that should have been attempted, even if Boswell told him that he could. So
Gotcha. And kind of building off that, and Will said it when he was on here. It kind of goes into this mentality of just we are trying to be so ultra conservative. I mean, the times that we opted for field goals when it was short distance most of the time, like in manageable situations, it would have been different if we were like 3rd and 12. It's like, okay, let's try a 42-yard field goal. That might be, at least a better chance of us doing that rather than picking up, a long down and distance. But a lot of times we were talking like 4th and 4, 4th and 3, and we weren't willing to even try it. So
nope.
It just goes to show you just the conservative nature of this franchise as a whole right now. And I understand some of it's personnel driven, and Kenny Pickett, you don't want to ask too much of Kenny Pickett, but let's actually talk about Kenny Pickett here. He made one critical mistake, with that interception he threw to the middle of the field. I don't know what he was thinking, but that changed the momentum, if there was any at that point. If it was anywhere close to 50-50 afterwards, that felt 90-10 in the Raiders' favor. So that's just a mistake. I know he's a rookie, but that's a mistake a quarterback cannot commit. That changed the entire complexity of that first half. We were driving down, potentially getting into range. Can't exactly remember where on the field that was. I do want to say it was on the other side of the 50, though. That turned into a scoring scenario, for the Raiders. They got a field goal off that. So, because you just can't do that. And it's part of his maturation process. I get that. But that's a play that loses you a game, So
yes,
that's something he's got to work at, something he's got to eliminate from his game. Because that was just a mental error. That wasn't him trying to make a play. That was him just unloading in the wrong area. So hopefully going forward, takes a look at that game tape and realizes that's a throw he should not be attempting. But yeah, just in general, nice for the Steelers to get a win.
yes.
All things, but there are some other big time games around the NFL this week. There's a lot of playoff games that are already happening, believe it or not. Games that have some serious playoff implications. Let's start off with one that probably means the most for any two teams out there. Carolina is visiting Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is favored by 3. Corey, you want to start off with this one?
This is a tough one because Carolina is one of those teams right now that they're going to be, not blatantly tanking, but they don't really want to win football games right now. Even if you aren't sold by some of the QBs at the top of the draft, you want the option to trade back. You want the option to take one if you end up liking them throughout the pre-draft process. This tanking in the NFL, especially in these last 2 or 3 weeks, is a real thing. Look at who the Chicago Bears are playing outside of Justin Fields. There's a lot of guys sitting who probably shouldn't be sitting right now. So this feels like a game where, the Bucs still have big time stakes. So it would just be pretty surprising to me to see the Bucs drop this one. They really want to win, and the Panthers to drop this, which not saying their players don't want to win, but the idea around the building is definitely going to be that they would prefer a loss. So that's going to be a tough atmosphere to win, especially when you're playing a team that really needs one.
Yeah, I tend to agree a little bit. But at the same time, though, I think Steve Wilks is seriously auditioning for a role to be not just the head coach to finish out this year, but to be the head coach year after, Steve Wilkes got a raw deal in Arizona. He was there for 1 year, and Arizona saw, a chance to take, throw a bunch of money at Cliff Kingsbury and draft Kyler Murray or whatever. So I'm not sure he really got, I know he didn't get a fair audition, out in Arizona. And I'm not saying he's done a spectacular job with the Panthers, but he's done a damn fine one. He's got this team believing in itself. This past game against Detroit, they set a franchise record for offense in the game. And that was with Sam Darnold at quarterback. I mean, good God. I mean, they put up 570 yards of offense. That's ridiculous. That's that's just ridiculous when you think about it. So I do think this team believes they can win. And I think that's dangerous, but it does feel like Tampa Bay is starting to put something of a run together here. They finally have some momentum late in the season. They've won 2 straight. Leonard Fournette's looked a lot better these past 2 games. He's still splitting carries with Rachaad White. Mike Evans looks like he is finally come alive for this offense. They're mixing stuff to both tight ends, Ko Kieft, Cade Otton, Chris Godwin's still playing well. Russell Gage has been making clutch plays. It's a team that hasn't been making plays, and they're finally starting to make them on a more consistent basis. So I worry about Carolina running the ball here a little bit. The Tampa Bay defense is still a good unit. So I like Tampa Bay to win this. 3 is probably right because I think this will be a very tight game. I think both teams know how much this means. Whoever wins this basically gets, the 4th division crown. So a big game, but I think Tampa Bay finds a way to win it. Another big game that I've already kind of brought up here. The Jets are visiting the Seahawks in Seattle. The Jets are fighting for their playoff lives. I'm not exactly sure about all the scenarios they need, but they're in the same boat as the Steelers. They have to win out to be there. So big time matchup here. I'll kind of get started with this one. Already said it once. Mike White is much better than Zach Wilson. This offense and this whole team plays different when Mike White is at quarterback. There's just an energy about this team that it's hard to match. They haven't been perfect when he's played, but the energy's been there. They've made plays when he's been in there. Even the defense feeds off the energy he gives this team. So I like the Jets because this is the first time the Jets have been fighting for a playoff spot in God knows how long, in all honesty. And it's not that I don't like Seattle. I just think the Jets, they have a better defense. And when Seattle's had trouble getting their offense started early, they have had troubles getting it going really at any point in the game because of their need to establish the run to give Geno more time in the pocket. So I like the Jets here. Corey, what do you like here? Oh, and I meant to say this. The Jets right now are favored by 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got to go with the Jets here. These are 2 of the Steelers Fury podcast favorites again. But you're right about Mike White. They just play with a different energy. And it's crazy how bad Zach Wilson is to make. I don't mean to diss Mike White, but for how much better the offense looks with him at the helm. And we all know Mike White isn't that good. He's a fun underdog story. It's this and that. But we know when it comes down to it, he's not a top 20 NFL QB. So for such a big difference in the offense, it's a testament to how bad Zach Wilson has played. But leaning into that and with how stifling the Jets defense can be sometimes, I mean, that's credit to Robert Saleh. I feel like things are just going to be really difficult for the Seahawks. I feel like the book's a little out on them. This last week, their receivers could not get off a press. And they have one of the better press corners already in the NFL with Sauce Gardner, just because of how athletic he is. He can jam at the line and keep up. So I feel like the Seahawks will just struggle to get anything of meaning going on offense. And I feel like the Jets will use that to their advantage and use defense to create offense, short fields, things of that nature.
Agreed. And not to spend too much time on this game in particular, but more specifically Zach Wilson.
Mhm.
It feels like his time is just done already. And that's crazy when you think about the fact that he's never played a full season of football in New York.
Mhm.
But he has lost the locker room. And I think he lost it the moment he made that comment after that poor game against New England, where he
Yep.
basically took no accountability for his performance. And I think after that, this team said, screw you, we're done. Like you
And
are not fit to be a professional quarterback in this league.
it was just a lack of understanding on optics. I mean, even if deep down you don't think it was your fault, which I mean, it was pretty evidently his fault. So that's one thing. But even if deep down you don't think it's your fault, you go to the press, and especially since you're a young QB, you definitely played like shit. You got to go and you're going to be like, it's on me. I don't care what happened with the defense. It's on me. I can't turn the ball over. I mean, people would criticize Ben, which this is, not drawing a comparison with Zach Wilson and Ben Roethlisberger, but people would criticize Ben for criticizing his teammates. But as mad as people would get about it, oftentimes, or almost every time, I would say, he was correcting them, throwing them under the bus, even if it wasn't right. But Ben would always take accountability for his bad games. 100% of the time, if Ben had a bad game, he would raise his hand on the podium. He'd say, it was me. This loss is on me. Other guys played great. You just have to understand as a quarterback when you're taking these questions, you had a bad game, that you sit up there, you take the bullets, you do not throw your teammates under the bus, because that is how you lose the locker room and quite possibly lose a career in the NFL.
Yeah, last thing I'll say about this, it's awkward when Zach Wilson buys his entire offensive line a bunch of scooters, and he's just kind of sitting there with a blank smile on his face, knowing more it was an obligation and not a thing he really wanted to do.
Yep.
That just seemed very clear to me. That was like, oh, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but it's not from the bottom of my heart, or it's not coming from the right place. So it'll be interesting to watch his future, because I think it's done in New York.
Yep.
I don't care what anyone says. That team is truly now a quarterback away from being, a damn fine NFL franchise with a very high future. It'll be interesting to see if the Jets might, dip into the quarterback thing here, trade a lot of draft picks, and go get a guy who they think they can win with, who can be a young professional and grow and stuff. But that's a whole nother topic for another episode. Let's get back to our game picks here. Another one that means a lot. Miami is visiting New England. New England is favored by 2.5. Corey, how do you feel about this game?
I like New England in this. It's Miami's been they've been a team of runs this year, and not even just in a game, which they are a team of runs even in game. They're hot and cold, but I believe off the top of my head, there's something like 4 wins, 3 losses, and like 3 or 4 wins, and then they're on a wicked losing streak right now. So I just see no reason for this team to turn it around right here. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is a serviceable backup, but I mean, you don't want to be going to New England with a backup when you're already playing bad as a team. I feel like morale is just not going to be good for this game. I mean, there's definitely a world where Miami wins and could even win big, because when you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill at receiver, I mean, that opens up so many options. And, sometimes you get the ball in those guys' hands and, cloud of dust. But this just feels like a Patriots game where they're going to grab hold of the advantage that they're given and just not let up.
I would tend to agree with you here. This is another cold weather game in the heart of New England that, the Patriots are built to do at this time of the year. And honestly, I'll give the Dolphins a lot of credit. I thought they played Buffalo extremely hard, despite, the weather. There was a lot of headlines made about, Miami playing in such cold weather. How would they perform? They actually performed pretty okay. But it's right now, there's even some mystery around Tua after this past game because I think it was in the second quarter. I can't remember when, maybe it was third, but he took a hard spill and on the back of his head. And apparently he didn't get tested for a concussion. But ever since then, that game, he threw 3 interceptions after that. He did not look very sharp. And the question right now is whether he is actually going through concussion protocol at this moment. So, with Teddy Bridgewater being that guy, it's a tough environment. New England's a tough-nosed football team. And, at this time of the year, this is when New England plays its best football. They're still fighting for their playoff lives. If they win their last two, I believe they are in. They might need a little bit of help here or there, but there's still a very realistic chance they make the playoffs. And I'm a big believer in Ramondre Stevenson. I know Bill Belichick came out and said, Stevenson's fumble in this last game didn't cost them the game against Cincinnati, but at one point they were down 22-0 and almost came back to win that game in Cincinnati. Just there's a lot of fight in this team, and that's what you need this time of the year. And like you said, it'll be interesting to kind of feel out Miami's feeling going into this game, what their attitude is, body language, all of that. So be very interesting. I like New England here too, just because of the weather, being at home. Another big time interdivisional matchup. Minnesota traveling to Green Bay. Green Bay is favored by 3.5. I couldn't believe that Green Bay found a way to win this past week, but when Tua throws you 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter, you have a lot better of a chance. But it'll be very interesting here. I still like Minnesota here. Green Bay has been another team of streaks, and they're still not a good football team. I don't care what they've done these last few weeks. They've looked better, but they're still not good. So I like Minnesota here. Minnesota is a team that is 11-0 in one-score games. So I know Corey has called them out. I know I've called them out. I know Will's called them out too, as one of the most unimpressive. Well, what are they now? 13-2 teams we've seen in a while. But the reality is they keep finding ways to win games. Whether we, agree with the hilarity behind some of these games, but I like Minnesota here. And I think Christian Watson might be questionable for this game too. If that's the case, I know he left the game. I'm pretty sure I can't remember what he left the game with, but I remember because I have him in fantasy. Got a notification that he left that game early. If he's not there, that really changes the dynamics of the Green Bay passing attack. He has been the guy making that go. He's the one guy that can go down the field and really stretch it. So I think that changes a lot of Green Bay's offense too. If for some reason he can't go. So I like Minnesota here to cover. Corey, how do you like this one?
The way I'm seeing it is there's no guarantee that Aaron Rodgers plays past this year. And I don't think, because I know even in his mind, he has to know that that's at least an option. So in his mind, he's playing for the playoffs. I just feel like in his head, there's no way he loses to the Minnesota Vikings the last time he plays the Minnesota Vikings. I just don't. One of those things where I just don't see it happening. Like if this is it for him, I don't think he goes out on a loss to the Vikings, or not goes out because there's still another week to play, of course. But last time he plays the Vikings, I don't think there's any way he loses. So off that alone, I'm going to take the Packers.
No, I mean, crazier things have happened. They still have a window for the playoffs. They're another team very much like Pittsburgh. They need some help to get in, even if they do win their last two. Same with the Jets, same with the Patriots. Lots of different playoff scenarios going around on both sides of each conference right now. Probably the biggest game this week. Buffalo headed to Cincinnati. Buffalo is a 1.5 point favorite. Did you start on this past one or did I?
You did.
All right, Corey, I'll let you start on this one then.
So the Bengals are legit. They took a little to warm up, but they are 100% in the conversation for being the top AFC team. They're right there with the Chiefs and the Bills. Now, I think it actually pairs up all pretty well to where the Bengals have the Chiefs number, Chiefs have the Bills number, and I think this game the Bills will prove that they have the Bengals number. I just think that they match up better than the Chiefs do with the Bengals, and just offensively and defensively. And even you can only have so many big wins in a season. I kind of feel I don't think the Bengals are this like dynamo of a team, and I feel like that Chiefs win might have used up a little bit of their secret stuff. Is one way to put it. So I feel like I think the Bills are our better team. I think the Bills match up better against them than most teams do, anyways. So I think I'm going to go with the Bills here, but I think it's a close one. I think it's going to be a high-scoring, close game.
Yeah, right now Bills are only favored by 1.5. I apologize if I didn't mention that beforehand, but I fall in the same boat as you, and a big reason for that is the Bengals lost Lyle Collins for the rest of the year. It seems like they're entering the stretch, the playoff stretch at the wrong time as far as injury bug comes around. This is an offensive line that has been better, but now that they're down a starter, and Akeem Adeniji is going to be playing at right tackle moving forward, who's performed solidly. I'll give him that. But, him going up against a Gregory Rousseau and AJ Epinesa, a litany of guys that the Bills put out there to rush the passer, it's asking a lot of him this week. So, Cincinnati's going to have to do a good job of, minimizing his weaknesses within their offense. I think because they have to do that, I think the Bills have an advantage there. I understand the game's in Cincinnati, but I just like the Buffalo Bills better. It seems like they're starting to hit a little bit of a stride themselves, even without Von Miller, for the rest of their playoff run. Josh Allen is starting to play better. They're starting to use their running backs better. They finally remembered that they have this tight end named Dawson Knox, who's actually pretty damn good. But, he's been a big key component of their success lately. They've involved Gabriel Davis. Stephon Diggs is still doing his thing. Isaiah McKenzie is contributing more to the passing game like I thought he would earlier in the year than he did during the middle of the year. So their offense is starting to find the right way. Their defense is playing better. I like Buffalo here too. With that being said, let's get to our 5-star matchup of the week, as Will always likes to call it. Pittsburgh headed to Dirty Town. We have to go to Baltimore, take on those damn Ratbirds. Ravens are favored by 3. I'll start off with this one since you started off on the other one. Man, this game truly could go either way. I like what the Steelers are doing right now. And maybe I'm a fool for believing it, but the defense has been playing it better against the run since we last played Baltimore. Maybe that's because we haven't played as good of teams, but it seems like the effort is there the past few games, and I think that could be the difference. If we can stop the Baltimore ground game, I think we can do enough offensively because, Corey, like you said, if it wasn't for 3, Mitchell Trubisky interceptions, that game looks a lot closer. There's probably some more scores on the board. I say we get it done this time. We always seem to split with this group. I think we find a way to split it. I'll call it 16-12. Or no, that's an odd score. I'll go 16.
Scoregami.
We go 16-14. We sprinkle in 3 field goals with a lone touchdown at some point in the game to end up winning this game. This is going to become a Justin Tucker kick fest, I think, for Baltimore. I think we find a way to get the job done. I've got us winning 16-14. Corey, how about you?
So, one thing to think about with this game, and I'd like to bring it up because we mentioned it last time we were playing the Ravens, but we didn't get to see it, is mean, this is the test for Kenny Pickett now. Like, not only is he getting his first real Ravens test, but it's his first real Ravens test with, a playoff bid on the line is essentially how you got to play this game. Like, you win, you at least get the fight still. So this is going to be a huge test. I mean, I think even if he goes out and stinks it up, I mean, me and Will have been two pretty big detractors of him, more so than a lot of people. We like the kid, but we point out a few more flaws than others tend to see. But I'm not really sure how much more he could show us that would really change and make me think of him for worse. Like, I feel like you've at least got a pretty good idea what his floor is at this point. Mm-hmm. But I mean, these are the games where you really see what someone's made out of. Like, you can talk about his floor and his ceiling, the intangibles and all that, but this is where, like, this is big time AFC North football, fighting for a playoff spot. So, I mean, what a great game to really see what Kenny Pickett's made out of. And I'm going to say it's not a Steelers game without the stress. I'm going to say all the things we need this week happen. I'm going to say all the things we need this week happen. We're still going to be alive going into the game. I think we're going to, let's say it's 17-17 coming out of regulation. I think we completely blow a 2-minute defensive possession and let them scrape in a field goal to go to OT. I'd say we win with the field goal in overtime after starting on defense just to make us sweat a little bit. And another thing to mention is that me and you have something big going on, and that's me and you both predicted that the Steelers would go 9-8 and miss the playoffs in the preseason podcast.
We did.
And that is very much alive looking at how this goes. So I would love to see a Steelers win, especially if it gives us playoff hopes. But, man, it'd be good to just rub a dead-on prediction right in Will's face.
I'll give you that. Since Will's not here to defend himself, it would be nice to let him know that these young guns got it right. So I like I said, I think there's a possibility we can pull out a win. I neglected to say this earlier. I should have, but Calais Campbell questionable with a knee coming into this game. Marcus Peters questionable with a calf injury. If Campbell doesn't play, that's a big advantage. Pittsburgh. That dude just wrecks us every time we try to go out there. One and good positive note to end this on is we do expect Terrell Edmonds back this week. They do expect him to play this week. They expect him to practice. They expect him to play. Miles Jack still dealing with a groin. Trey Norwood dealing with a hamstring. They're not ruled out, but it'll be interesting to see how they practice this week. So it'd be nice to get Terrell Edmonds back in a game where, he matches up favorably with, the Will Likely and the Mark Andrews of the world there. So with that being said, we're both predicting 2 wins. Will's predicting I think he said, what was it, a 23-16 loss?
Yeah, sounds right.
So it would sure be nice to best him this week of all weeks, and
he's just hoping to be closer to a 6-win total prediction.
Yeah, it's kind of like he said though. It's not. We're not dreaming of a top 10 pick anymore. We're going to be drafting, in the back half of the first round pretty solidly. Unless we drop both these games, we might shoot up to 12 or something. But at this point, it'd almost be better to get 2 wins to see what this team can be made of going forward than maybe just get, an improvement on just a few slots in the draft. So hopefully we can do that. Mike Tomlin can keep his little bullshit record of never having a losing together. Pittsburgh fans can bitch about that a little bit more. Man, I'm going to have to rate this episode explicit just on that little but with that being said, thank you for joining us for another episode here at the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Coleman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the Bestest Boards, and always joined by my stalwart companion, Corey Karbowski, as Corey39. Any last thoughts before we sign off here, sir?
Matt Canada's a fraud.
Oh man, we're gonna have a whole episode dedicated this offseason to that man alone, Steeler Fury fans. With that note, go get them, Steelers. Let's see some terrible towels waving in Baltimore. Let's steal a win. Let's hope that we can just spoil the party a little bit on their way, as they've already locked off a playoff spot. Thank you and good night.